Hello and welcome to another video and podcast from fantasyfootballscout.co.uk. My name is David and today I am joined by very esteemed company. It is former FPL winner Simon March. We're going to be having a look at his team. Famously won FPL in 2014-15 campaign and has stuck around in a great way. Done very, very well since then. Been an active part of a lot of Fantasy Football Scout coverage down through the years. Very, very happy to have you here, Simon. How are you doing at the start of the 23-24 campaign?
I'm good, thanks, David. Thank you for having me on. Good to have FPL almost back. Just saying before, it snuck up on me a little bit. I did what I think most people did, which was go on auto pick your team and then just switch it off and forgot about it for a month. And now there's I think 8 or 9 days away from the season starting. It feels suddenly feels very real.
Yeah, it always creeps up. I don't know why. It's a bit like Christmas or the changing of the clocks. You sort of think, you don't have to worry about that for a while. Then all of a sudden it's, Christmas Eve and you haven't done your shopping yet. Or, maybe you haven't changed your clock and you lose an hour's sleep or whatever. It always gets us. I'd never quite understand why.
Every Christmas, though, isn't it?
And the other thing, of course, we've been doing it for so long, and you're one of the people that's been around since the very beginning, really, with a lot of the coverage that Fantasy Football Scout has done. I mentioned there you won the whole thing in 14-15. This is now, I think, your 8th season as a former winner. Nobody can take that away from you, for better or for worse, I suppose. Because we do always talk about it whenever you're around. What's that like? I mean, just in daily life, you've been dealing with it for longer than many of the other winners, of course, because it was a little while ago, but still here, still relevant, still doing well. But what's it been like dealing with that for nearly a decade?
Um, I don't know. It's becoming so long ago that it's almost embarrassing to mention it now. It's quite a nice thing to have and to think about occasionally. I have to remind myself that it happens every now and again. Think, oh yeah, that actually happened, didn't it? But yeah, it's a nice thing. It's a nice thing to have on your CV. It's not literally on my CV. But
Oh, what
it's
a missed
nice.
opportunity.
I know. Well, I'm self-employed now, so the
There we are.
embarrassment.
My wondering is, you probably don't bring it up at parties, but do your friends and family ever introduce you to people as this is Simon? He wants one FPL. You ever have to deal with any of that, or is it sort of slipped into sort of your secret? People like to just let you keep that to yourself rather than you have to deal with the fanfare every time you meet strangers.
No, so it's 100% mentioned.
Oh, right.
Sometimes it's the fact that I've won FPL is mentioned before my name is mentioned. So when I get introduced, this guy won FPL. Oh, and his name's Simon, by the way. Yeah. People, still get quite excited about it, but I try not to mention it too much. Um,
Well, I
but
have to say that's a very admirable level of humility. I don't know if I would be able to have the same level of humility if I won. So fair play.
I'll tell you when it's difficult. The only time it's difficult is when I'm sitting on the train or something, and there's two people, two lads talking about their FPL team, and you just sort of go to them. Oh yeah, what's your best rank? Oh yeah, that's not bad. Yeah, do you want to know mine? But, yeah, I've yet to actually do that.
Oh, I really want to see that now. A situation where they're sort of talking about putting someone terrible in. It's like, well, I don't know if you should do that, mate. Oh, what do you know?
Yeah,
Well,
exactly. Yeah.
that's what we want to see. But of course, I mentioned as well, obviously, that you have done very well outside of that. There's absolutely no suggestion at all that you're any kind of one-hit wonder or anything like that, because your rank history outside of winning it is still, most people would do a lot of things to try and get rank history as good as this. So 4 times in the top 10K, 9 times in the top 50K. I mean, it must feel quite cool to have that as well, because we've seen some winners in the past do very well in one season, because in theory you kind of have to make the wrong, in inverted commas, decision 38 times in a row and it come off, because you've got to beat everybody else. And so for you to have been able to do that in one season but still have the skill, and I'm going to call it skill because there is skill to having consistency over this long period, it must feel quite cool to have been able to balance that. I wonder if you had any insight of, did you have different approaches for your seasons where you maybe finished sort of 30k, 20k, admirable finishes? That was different to the season that you won, the whole thing. Was there differences between those campaigns and how you approach things?
Um, I don't know. I mean, I think two things kind of happen that once you've won it is that everything after that feels like an anticlimax. So I think I came something like 20k the season afterwards, and it felt, it felt so embarrassing to mention. Whereas obviously, 20k, I'd be very happy with 20k rank this season. But the other thing that happens is that you start feeling like you can become very experimental, and sometimes that pays off, and sometimes it doesn't. And So on some level, the way that I've played has changed, because I take probably a few more risks than I used to. I'm maybe a little bit less data led and a bit more sort of I think experimentally focused. I like to try and find new ways of playing the game if I can uncover some. And some I've incorporated into my overall strategy, and some I've just discarded. But I suppose that's something that you have a unique benefit of, that you can't get any higher than than your best finish. So you might as well have some fun with it.
I mean, that's a great point, because if anyone ever turns around and goes, "Oh, I don't know about that," maybe you don't know what you're talking about. You can be like, "Yes, I do." It comes back to that whole, like, you just have carte blanche to just basically do what you want, which must be quite freeing. And I suppose the one thing that actually stands out from what you've said there, really, it kind of sounds like you've been adaptable, because the game has changed a lot in the time that we've been playing it. Some of the changes are obvious, some of them not so much. Sometimes you get a campaign where lots of hits are going to pay off. Sometimes you get a campaign where lots of hits aren't going to pay off. Sometimes you've got 3-4-3 is the way to go, 3-5-2, big at the back. You must have seen a lot of things come and go, and it sounds like you've very much rolled with the punches and evolved as the game's changed as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that there are the changes in the game. Things have happened. I think when around the time that I won, it tended to be number 10s were the main focus, and number 10s in the way that they existed then that don't really exist now. You don't often have that player playing directly behind the striker, and it all became about attacking fullbacks for a while, and now it sort of seems to be adapting a little bit onto maybe something else, maybe more of a focus on midfield and inverted wingers and inverted fullbacks as well. And so you have the way that the game of football changes, but then you also have the way that FPL has changed. And the season after that was when the chips were introduced. And I mean, one observation is that there are a lot more points in the game sloshing around these days. Part of that has been driven by players like Salah, scoring 200 plus points a season, and Haaland obviously last season. But some of it has been driven by triple captainships and things like that. And I think what it illustrates is, one, the importance of doing well with your chips, but also that there's a benefit to perhaps playing a bit more aggressively these days, because the opportunity to score big is much greater than perhaps it used to be, and maybe that justifies the risk of taking. I think it certainly justifies perhaps taking more hits. So people who are good at taking hits, I think, probably do quite well in the modern iteration of FPL.
Well, see, I remember a time when taking hits was seen as this reckless thing that no sensible FPL manager would ever attempt. And as you say, it has made a big difference in some cases if you can get them right. And even just from my own personal experience, it's only really the last season that we've just had where I started to take more hits, and I managed to go from like 800k at the start of the World Cup to 179 places outside of the top 10k, which is annoying mouthful, but a technicality I have to acknowledge. But that jump from there to there was taken by being aggressive. So I have to say, even in my own personal experience, I've seen the benefit of moving in that direction. Before we come to your team, I'm just going to talk about some of the stuff that you've done for Fantasy Football Scout down through the years, and still continue to do on a regular basis with your articles, because I personally have always enjoyed them. I used to edit them as well, so it was a lot of fun editing those articles. I didn't have to change very much, so thank thank you for that. But they're always really insightful as well, because it's not just about who's the right player to sign this week, because we have a lot of content like that, and that's all very useful. But having a lot of sort of psychological input on how to play this game in a broader sense, I've always found really interesting. I can think of a few subjects, things like recency bias or the sunk cost fallacy. A lot of these ideas that you can maybe spot in other walks of life, how you apply them to FPL, I've always found really interesting. I wonder if you could perhaps talk us through where you get a lot of that from perhaps from your own personal experience or professional experience, and what it's been like being able to sort of carry on discussing that over the last few years with Scout.
Yeah, so my background is in behavioral science and economics. So I've sort of, a lot of how I play the game myself is I think there's a lot of focus on statistics, and those have become much more easy to use because of sites like Fantasy Football Scout and the members area and things. We're refining stats that used to be very complex. People used to have to sort of do their own regression analysis if they really wanted to get under the hood of FPL, and now it's kind of calculated for you in a nice, easy to read sort of way. And so using statistics is still really useful, but I've started to feel that the extra advantage that perhaps you get is by managing your personal biases, and that's something that I've focused on a lot in terms of my game, questioning the decisions that I'm making, why I'm making these decisions. Are they based in a rational calculation, or is it something that that I want, or something that I feel that I need to do because I invested 3 game weeks ago, and I feel like I need a payoff for it now. And that's something that I like to write about as well in the articles. So the articles that I write for Scout tend to be focused on psychology or economics, sometimes statistics, sometimes really random things like the 2008 housing crisis and what we can what it can teach us about FPL, things like that. So I try and take a different view of it, and hopefully people find them interesting.
Yeah, certainly it's taught me a lot down through the years as well. I mean, I think my favourite thing that I learned from you, without wanting to sound too much like a fanboy, is let consistency be your differential. When everybody else around you is looking for some different route to go and is not necessarily always able to pin down exactly who that's going to be, and you see a lot of chaos, a lot of entropy perhaps, with just so many different variables. If you're sort of being very focused internally on just going with something rational, and then you maintain a consistency in terms of always going for the same type of safe picks, that in and of itself becomes a differential in the maelstrom of everybody just kind of looking at the next sparkly, shiny thing. And that sort of transformed the way I played FPL for a number of years. Is that something you still try to stick to now? Is that advice you would still give, or is that something you might want to tweak as the game continues to evolve?
I think it's definitely something that I still believe in, and I think that there's so much focus on differentials and explosiveness around players that and getting a triple figure game week score and things, that it sort of gets overlooked, that if you score 65 points every game week on average, then you've got a very good chance of winning FPL, 65 to 70 points, and I try and sort of maintain that focus myself, and it informs the way that I build my teams, and maybe we'll see that a little bit in my current draft. I think it's become much more difficult to do these past few seasons, and I think that actually sticking too rigidly to that approach probably was detrimental. Maybe not last season, maybe the COVID season, where I think there was actually a real benefit to sort of leaning into the chaos and letting it be an opportunity, as Lord Baelish in said, chaos is the ladder, and I think that was definitely the case. The last few seasons, if you could lean into it and you could make it work for you, then it was a real advantage. But hopefully, we're heading for a normal season finally.
Yeah, try not to tempt fate there. Don't manifest more chaos. Ladders are great, but no. I mean, also Game of Thrones references, of course. If we can have some Game of Thrones style comparisons and articles this season, I think people will be very happy. So yeah, do keep an eye out for Simon's content on the site as well. It's very very useful, very insightful. Now, before we continue and have a look at Simon's team in its current form, just a quick reminder to people that it's now is the best time, of course, to sign up to Fantasy Football Scout membership. Simon's obviously mentioned some of the benefits you get from that, and right now you can save up to 30% on those preseason prices. You'll get access to the world-leading preseason guide for all the FPL teams, which is starting to populate very nicely now. We've had lots of FPL preseason games. Also includes the preseason minutes tracker as well, which is looking very hefty as well. We're starting to get a good idea of who's playing what minutes and who's the favoured players in a lot of positions. You get season points projections, team transfer planners, and drafts from the best fantasy managers, including some former winners. Of course, we have one of those in the virtual studio today. And so without further ado, let's stick that team on the screen. Simon has clarified that this is in no way a final team. This is a team that's very much in draft form. Lots of changes could come. I'm just going to read it off for the benefit of the podcast listeners, and we're going to jump into some of the dilemmas that he is facing at the start of the season. So we've got Onana and Areola as the goalkeeper pairing. We've got Chilwell, Gabriel, Stones as the starting defenders, with Colwill and Bell on the bench. We've got Mbeumo, Saka, Rashford, and Fernandes as a midfield four, with Mr. Anderson on the bench. And then Gabriel Jesus and Nkunku and Haaland up front, with Haaland captained. And so the first thing, I guess, that leaps out to me here is it's a 3-4-3 formation, which wasn't all that favourable a formation to be in when the game launched, but it's slowly emerging as a real authoritative school of thought going into the last sort of 10 to 13 days of preparation. So what's that been like for you? Did you start in 3-5-2, switch to 3-4-3, or were you in 3-4-3 from the outset?
I've been through a few different iterations. I definitely had 3-5-2 at one point. I had a 4-4-2 right up until very recently. It's been the emergence of I think that third striker spot. We're starting to see a few options emerge at the moment. So when I say third striker spot, the players that I've had from the beginning have been Nkunku and Haaland, and I can come in and explain why in a sec, I suppose. But I think Darwin at Liverpool has scored 4 goals already in pre-season. I think you've got Watkins at Aston Villa. Obviously, I've gone for Gabriel Jesus to begin the season. So I think there are so many options now emerging around about that. I think you can go down a couple of million in price, or 0.5, and look at Nicholas Jackson at Chelsea as well. And I think with midfield, I mean there are loads and loads of options, but it's very tricky because the best options sort of seem to be either 6.5 or around kind of 8.5 million, and it's and not a lot around that unless you go super premium and start looking at people like Salah again. And so in a way, I feel like maybe there's more value in maximizing your striker spots at the moment, and just focusing on the best 8.5 and 6.5 mids. As you see it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of slowly coming around to that thinking as well, having been in 3-5-2 before, because there's just so many in the striker department that are doing well. And we have to talk about Chelsea, I think, because Chelsea are contributing to that, because Jackson's doing well in pre-season. You had Nkunku from the start. You got Chilwell in there and Colwill. So, I mean, I'm sort of now broadly asking you about Chelsea kind of as a whole, really obviously using the fact that you know the Blues very well, being a fan, and you watch them a fair amount as well, is my guess. So, you've got a decent understanding of what this team is looking like at the start of the season. And what intrigued me the most about how you described your forwards is that when I first got my team, I was like, Haaland and Jesus, they're my two. So when you said third striker, I assumed you meant on top of Haaland and Jesus, but no. You already had Nkunku, and Jesus was your third striker, which in many ways is sort of reversed from what a lot of people have been thinking. So, in effect, your thinking on Nkunku has been positive since the beginning, and you've now got Colwill and Chilwell as well. So, I'll sort of like hand the microphone back to you to just Chelsea at the start of the season. A triple up is what you've got right now. Is it going to stay that way, do you think? Are you hopeful about the start of the season? Do you think you're getting in there early versus that game week 3 fixture swing? So, over to you to talk Chelsea for as long as you want.
I think Nkunku has been in my team since day one, and has never left. I mean, looking at it, so when I talk about personal biases, this is perhaps an example of it being manifested right now. Um, but I wouldn't always be this confident in a new player to the league. What I like about Nkunku is that he's almost a throwback to what I was talking about earlier on, to that sort of traditional or that old school number 10. The sort of Rooney, Van Persie kind of forward, to somebody who would assist as much as they would score. He's probably on penalties for Chelsea. He's got quite good direct free kick on him as well. But what I really like about him is that he's listed as a forward. Honestly, in my opinion, he should have been listed as a midfielder. But this is what we have. He could play up front. I think he will get some minutes up front. But I think that there's also a position for him in that number 10 spot. There might also be a position for him on the left wing. And the fact that he covers 3 or 4 different positions means that his minutes should be really, really strong. And I know that it doesn't always translate Bundesliga into Premier League, but I mean, he was so sort of superlative last season in terms of his goal scoring and his creative work as well. That I feel that 7.5 could be a steal. So he's somebody that I'm willing to take a risk on. I don't think it's a massive risk personally. I think that his involvement levels, how he's looked in pre-season, he's scored a few goals already, and the fact that Chelsea's fixtures after game week 1 are reasonably good, it's not too big a risk.
Well, the price is really helpful, actually, because just thinking back to perhaps like Werner when he came in, I think he might have been 9 million. So I think in many ways the pricing structure is sort of acknowledged the Bundesliga tax now, which I don't like saying, because I don't think, I'm not one of these people that comments in all the videos being like, oh, Bundesliga tax. You get these people that just sort of go, oh, it's not as good a league. But clearly there has been a slight issue of transition between players from that league to this one. And so therefore we're a little bit more inclined to take a risk on whether or not that might be an issue if the price is the way that it is. And I, like you, was very disappointed when he came in as a forward, because I'd done a scout report on him earlier in the season, in the pre-season. I thought, oh, this guy looks spicy. I hope he's going to be a midfielder, because that's probably where he's going to play. Ended up being a forward. It's probably helped us, because if he was a midfielder, he would be competing with the likes of Saka, Rashford, and Fernandes, and a lot of those Arsenal midfielders who we also feel like we should have. Whereas the competition for places in the forwards is there's arguably less competition there. But then it just gives you that opportunity to perhaps leverage another price point that other people might not be interested in. So it makes them a bit of a differential. So maybe the forward classification might be a blessing in disguise, possibly.
Yeah. I think the cynic in me would say that FPL put him as a forward to give us something to think about up front, because there aren't that many. I don't know. I mean, I think that there are options, but probably not an absolute sort of plethora of options. I don't know if I'm contradicting what I said earlier now, but I think maybe if you took Nkunku out, then maybe the forward options would look a little bit spare, especially since we're all having Haaland. So yeah, I think having him there has given us something extra to think about. But yeah, I mean, personally, I don't see him. I'm not saying they're the same type of player, but I don't see him as any more of a forward than perhaps Rashford would be or Havertz would be. So yeah, it is a bit disappointing that he's been listed as one, but I still think that he'll do enough to justify. And yeah, 7.5 is not a bad price either.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose the one additional question here on this part of the Chelsea attack is you have mentioned Nicholas Jackson doing quite well in the pre-season. He would save you another 0.5. Can you see yourself switching to him before the start of game week 1? What have you what you've seen in pre-season enough to make you think you might make that switch, or do you still need to see a little bit more information on him versus Nkunku? Is that a 50-50 in your head at the moment?
I think arguably he's been Chelsea's best player in pre-season, and I think if you'd asked me maybe a week ago, I would have been very tempted to go with him instead. I think the concern now is that Chelsea are talking. There's a possibility that Vlahovic is He's been linked with Chelsea. Just the fact that they're looking at another striker option. If that wasn't a factor, then I think that Jackson has pretty much got a free run at it, and he looks really, really good. He looks good in terms of goal scoring. He looks good in terms of link-up play as well. So I think somewhere in the season he might be a real option. But to begin with, I think it's always important to know that the player that you're backing in your game week 1 team is going to start regularly for the foreseeable. And at the moment, I see Nkunku as a bit more reliable than Jackson.
That makes a lot of sense, and I suppose is a useful little segue to the rest of your Chelsea contingent if we're talking about how likely players are to start, because I think people will obviously notice you've got Colwill on your bench, and it does appear in the last few days that he very much has ascended to a level of this guy's probably going to start quite a lot of games for Chelsea this season. Would you concur with that with your Chelsea hat on as well as your FPL one?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a guarantee necessarily, but Cole is the only left-sided centre-back that Chelsea have fit at the moment. Badiashile is still injured, and he hasn't played any minutes in pre-season. So at the moment, it's Colwell's position to lose. I think it's a funny one because looking at it, I wouldn't really want to triple up on Chelsea from the beginning. I do think that they're an option. I think that they're a little bit like Arsenal of last season in that, there's a lot of players in there that might have been discounted based on how they performed, or how Chelsea as a team performed the season before. And if you believe that with a new manager and a whole new ethos, that Chelsea will perform a lot better, then they could be significantly discounted. There could be really, really good value. I think if you look at Colwill in isolation, sort of say, okay, you've got an almost guaranteed starter, at least for the first few game weeks, for Chelsea in a 4.5. Chelsea's defence, even if nothing else was good last season, Chelsea's defence was pretty good. I would say that Colwill looks great value, probably the best value among the 4.5s. I don't know. You could argue maybe Newcastle have an option there, but I think in isolation he looks really good. I don't know if I want that triple up necessarily though. There's always the possibility that are you investing too much in a single team? Would there be other options? Could Mudryk or somebody emerge as a must-have Chelsea player? Could Sterling? Could Reece James? Might the Chilwell James double up be back on? So yes, Cole is one that I'm thinking about. But at the moment, I think having that 4.5 defender for a team that I hope and anticipate will do quite well defensively as a first sub, I think is really fairly strong.
Lots of options, as you say, like with the midfielders as well. Like because I had Sterling in my first draft, so it's like could see that could work out. Of course, we've got Lauren's brother as well, as he's being known now, who could potentially come into your thinking as well. I suppose actually my question here actually about Colwill versus Chilwell, because it sounds like there could be a Colwill versus Chilwell or Lauren's brother before game week 1, because if you're worried about a triple up, if you had to choose between one of the 5.5 fullbacks or the 4.5 centre back, do you know necessarily where you would sit? Of course, right now you've got Chilwell starting, so my guess is maybe you've got a favour in that direction. But if you wanted to leave yourself open, which of those would have to go? Because my guess is Nkunku would stay if you were moving away from a triple up to start with, so you could pivot at a later point.
Yeah, I think of the three that I've got at the moment, Colwill is probably the one that I'd be most inclined to move on. Despite the fact that I think that for the reasons that I've given, but in isolation, I still think that he's a really good option. I think that of the fullbacks, Chilwell is the better option at the moment, just based on the way that the team have been playing in pre-season. Chilwell is often the most far forward player in attack. James, at the moment, the way Chelsea seem to be playing is that in possession, James is sort of dropping in and creating a back three. And that might change if Chelsea get a number 6 like Caicedo, and maybe he'll occupy that position. But at the moment, James isn't, or the right fullback rather, because James has only played maybe 45 minutes, I think, hasn't been bombing on the way that perhaps you've seen in the past. but Chilwell has absolutely been bombing on, and he's been taking corners as well, from the left and the right. So there's such a high ceiling at the moment with Chilwell, and yeah, as long as he can stay fit, I mean, we've seen what he can be like. He loves making those inverted runs. He's a goal threat, but he's also a creative threat as well. So yeah, he's the one that I'm backing at the moment. I've got a bit of PTSD with James last season, where I somehow managed to hold on to him through, I think, 2 major injuries. If ever you wanted an example of sunk cost fallacy, it was me holding James for that long last season. But I don't necessarily hold that against him. I still think that he's actually a pretty decent option this season. But of the two, yeah, I prefer Chilwell.
Yeah, I mean, they're in many ways very different types of fullbacks. I mean, a lot of people sort of just kind of lump them in the same category of like, oh, attacking fullbacks. But, Reece James is a little bit more, I mean, from when I've watched him visually, he almost has a demeanour a bit like Trent, where his best thing that he does is that thing where he's a little bit further back from the box and loops those balls in, kind of like out swinging at first and then in swinging again, almost like KDB. And is very much the creator, whereas Chilwell will go pretty much all the way to the dead ball line and have a shot at a really, really like obscene angle, and sometimes get it in the top left-hand corner. They're very, very different types of fullbacks, and as long as you can get Chilwell in a period where he's guaranteed to play, or at least more likely to, he's fit, for example, and involved in set pieces, I do think I would probably go with Chilwell, just because that point ceiling is higher, because just the goals are going to get you so many more points, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's a question mark. People are talking about Martson, Cucurella's still there. Lewis Hall is there as well. Chelsea have got 4 options at left back, or players that can play there. But Chilwell does seem to be the standout. And Martson, when he's been playing, has actually been playing as a forward. And that might be a strategy. That might be something that allows Chilwell to go forward. But at the moment, he hasn't really been competing with Chilwell for that left back spot. It's been mostly Cucurella, and between Cucurella and Chilwell at the moment, there's no comparison. Chilwell is so far ahead. So yeah, I hope that he's a pretty reliable starter. He certainly seems that way based on preseason.
Fingers crossed. And also just from a personal perspective, like, we've seen what he can do when he's fit, and he's been very unfortunate with those injuries. So it will be nice, I think, even for just the neutrals, to see him get a good stab at the team. Could be good for England as well if he can string some games together. But we talked about Chelsea for probably, too long for those of you who are maybe watching who are a Spurs fan, so we do apologise for that, but it's good to talk about it. I do want to have a quick chat about Salah now, because he is, of course, the elephant in the room. He's not in your team, and I am asking everybody this question, so it's nothing personal. But have you experimented with the Salah draft? Can you see yourself breaking this to get him with that game week 1 FOMO? I think we talked before we came on. You're not going to be at Fest. You're going to be in Bulgaria on holiday, I think. So that might be good for missing some FOMO. But what's your thinking with Salah? Have you ever had him at any point? Can you see yourself changing your mind?
Yeah. I mean, first draft, Salah was one of the first names on it, and I mean, I still think that he's a great option, but if I had a real, where I really fell down last season, was in captaincy. Was when I rotated away from Haaland and back to fixtures with Salah. And I would do that on occasions. I think one really memorable one was Salah was playing Brighton, Liverpool thrashed them, and Salah maybe got an assist or something. The next day, Haaland, who seemed to have a much more difficult fixture against United, scored a hat-trick. And just those occasions where I moved away from Haaland were so detrimental that this season I can't really see myself doing it at all. He'd have to really drop off to convince me to captain anybody else. So with that in mind, Salah looks very expensive at 12 million, especially when you look at perhaps the emerging players, the likes of Saka, Rashford. If Rashford continues his second half of the season form from last season, he could perform Salah type numbers. So could Saka. And so there are a few players that are not quite listed as premium, a little bit under that could absolutely deliver at that level. And the fact that without going Salah less means that you can have maybe 2 or 3 of those players in your squad. It feels like too good an opportunity. So it's not really a comment on Salah himself. It's the fact that if you're not going to captain him, then it's a lot of money to invest in one player. And there are so many other options with really good fixtures to begin with. That I'm leaning definitely towards towards spreading the budget around.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and I said that it seems to be what most people are thinking. Salah's in about 25% of teams now, I think it is, which is unheard of low levels for him. I suppose my only final question on Salah before we're going to talk about those other midfielders you mentioned there, is what you've seen of him in pre-season. Has that made you additionally nervous? Because that is where we've seen that little shift. At the beginning, everyone was like, I'm not going to have Salah. And then as Liverpool have started to actually throw a lot of goals at their opponents and Salah being heavily involved in them, that I think is what's triggered people going, what if? And so if Salah continues his pre-season form, does that change your thinking? Or do you think you would just sort of turn around and give me the same answer?
Yeah, I think when I look at pre-season, I tend to only use it in a confirmation sort of way. Players that have got no sort of real pedigree in FPL can look really, really good in pre-season, and then the game actually starts, the Premier League actually starts, and they look completely out of their depth. So when a player like Salah is doing well in pre-season, that does make me sit up and take notice. But I think that you could also look at Darwin Núñez as well, and look at his form in pre-season and say, well, maybe Salah isn't the only option at Liverpool. Liverpool have got a few of these sort of mid-priced assets, both in midfield and in the forward line as well, that also look really, really good. And I mean, there has to come a point where the pressure comes off Salah to be everything for Liverpool going forward. Mane has obviously moved on, and they haven't really sort of found another outlet for goal scoring. At least last season, obviously, Jota did really well the season before. But I wonder if actually there's another emerging option from within Liverpool themselves. Even if you're not looking outside of them. So yeah, I mean, I think I'm tempted to sort of wait and see. Honestly, we spent a lot of last season where Salah wasn't even really in our thinking, and that was when he was ticking along quite nicely as well. So yeah, I think you do have to sort of be a bit ruthless with your budget and your decisions, and can't necessarily live in fear of Salah exploding. The fact that he's in 25% of teams makes you think, well, actually, if he does explode, is it that much of a detriment? If people aren't going to be captaining him. So yeah, I'm going Salah-less for now, and I'm not too concerned. I think the most likely scenario that Salah would come into my thinking is if I feel like I need a differential, and he's got some really good fixtures.
Yeah, that's true, and they do take a little while for them to be fixtures worth thinking about. I suppose one slight question I'll have is: will you be back from Bulgaria in time to be at Chelsea versus Liverpool, and that could give you the opportunity to have that eye test? Because if he does well there as well, it might sting on two levels.
I won't. But as a Chelsea fan, I don't know how I would feel about that anyway. So, just try and block it out, and yeah, I don't know. No, I won't be. But yeah, I'm sure I'll see plenty of Salah on TV. Yeah, I mean, I have to see. It is a bit. I am a bit wary that he's got Bournemouth, in game week 2, but I don't think that you can put too much focus on any single game week. Yeah, I think. And if he becomes completely impossible to ignore, then I think that I've got some options that I can move around to get him in. But like I was saying, I'd most likely go for him if I need a differential captain, and that would take a lot after last season to move me away from Haaland anyway. So
You've done a very good job, by the way, of resisting. I've thrown so many different permutations where you might end up with Salah, and you're like, nope, nope. Every time, I almost felt like I'm doing a Sunday morning politics show. We're like, surely, Minister, you would consider this. So, no, you've held the line. So I'm very impressed. And so let's talk about the positive decisions you've made from the concept of not having Salah, Rashford and Bruno. I like that. It looks very. Is that a double down on United, or is that more a case of a price point influence decision of like, oh, I can have two guys who are good in this price point? What's you thinking there?
it's a bit of both. I think Rashford is the one that I would have out of the two. Although I do like the kind of role that Fernando seems to be playing now, behind the striker. Excuse me. And obviously United have got really good fixtures as well to begin with. So maybe that justifies a double up. I'm not that keen on having that much budget from a single team. Or it's not so much the budget. It's more having two major kind of midfielder assets that, I don't know, obviously they can combine for points, but United are only going to score so many goals, and so on some level you're dividing that automatically, rather than where you can. What you really want, I suppose, in FPL is you want to find the player who's the real standout, and just back him. And for me, that's Rashford at the moment. Even though he hasn't looked fantastic in pre-season. Fernandez, I think if I had an extra 0.5, I'd be really tempted to go for Son instead. Partly to spread it around, but partly also because the question marks over Harry Kane, a lot of people are talking about Richarlison. I think that there are a few options, possibly Maddison as well within Spurs. But historically, when Kane has been out, it's been Son who's stepped up. He's come down a lot in price. If he was 9 million last season, he would have been quite good value, but we expect him to really outperform that. So he's somebody that I'm looking at. Not brilliant fixtures to begin with, but yeah, he's definitely on the watch list.
Yeah, it's about game week 3 that Spurs sort of come into consideration, I think, for a lot of people, because Brentford away, United at home, the first two, then Bournemouth away, Burnley away, Sheffield United at home. Those three look really, really nice. That could even be around the time that Kane leaves. Kane could be around for the first two, which is hard to invest in with everything going on. He might have even left by the start of the season. Obviously Bayern Munich have come to London with their executives, for example, so that might happen as well. But that could be around the time that Richarlison and so on sort of start to become more focal point of that team. So it could be useful. So yeah, as you say, there's price points behind those players that are quite useful. I suppose with the Arsenal double up you've got in attack, it's maybe a slightly different story in that the price points you're probably keen on. But the thing is, there's lots of options in those price points. And so you've got Saka and Jesus. I wondered what had perhaps influenced your thinking about having specifically those two over perhaps a Martinelli or Havertz, Odegaard, even Trossard, who's their top goal scorer in pre-season, was actually their top attacking return deliverer in the last 12 game weeks of last season, despite not actually starting all that often. So there's just so many options. You've gone with Saka and Jesus. What was the thinking behind picking those two?
Yeah, I'm just trying not to overthink it with Arsenal, and Saka feels like the most nailed on option among the midfielders. He's potentially on penalties as well, and I think he fell away a bit last season. And I think if that wasn't the case, you could possibly be looking at him at sort of 10.5 million. But he probably got overplayed a bit, I think, and he went through a period where he just looked absolutely exhausted. Presumably he's recovered now, and so I think that even at 8.5, where he's maybe slightly more expensive than some of the options, I still think that he's the standout pick. I do really like Martinelli. He's a player that I had almost the whole of last season, and he was fantastic. But it's the addition of Havertz and the fact that Trossard is a factor as well that really has me thinking. That I know that Havertz supposedly hasn't been brought in to play in any of those positions, but I'm not sure I can see him. Supposedly, as I understand it, Havertz is in to replace Xhaka, so he would play as a sort of a number 8 alongside Odegaard, with Rice or Partey in behind. I'm not sure I can see that working. I have a feeling that at some point we're going to see Havertz push forward, and I don't think that he's going to dislodge Saka. But I think that there is probably a conversation when it comes to Martinelli or Trossard, possibly even Jesus. So yeah, Saka just feels one. He feels like the best option, to me, and he seems like the safest option as well.
Yeah, I mean, certainly it'd be very difficult for him to get rotated. Even if he went through a bad-ish couple of games, he is just so integral to that team. And any team he's in, watching him play for England, it's the same thing. He really just stands out as one of the best players on the park. Even if he's not necessarily getting goals and assists, he plays well enough pretty much every game that you have to say, yeah, he's much more nailed on to start. Let's finish off by just really tying up your defence with a nice little bow, because we haven't really talked about it too much. We've left it to the end. Arsenal, you've got some representation there in Gabriel. You've got Stones as well. You've got Bell on the bench. We've kind of talked about Colwill. My imagining here is very much you want to start with three guys who you would start most weeks, and only on the rarest of occasions you'd rotate, just based on the money you've put into Gabriel and Stones. And I suppose the other question, of course, is that influenced by price points, teams, players, etc.? What's the thinking behind those extra guys?
Yeah, it's all those things. So, with obviously I've got Onana in goal. I'm not massively keen on that. Not a comment on him. I would just rather that I could have Ramsdale or possibly Raya if he joins Arsenal, because I think I would rather have United's outfield defenders, Delort or Shaw. It seemed a bit more attacking. Gabriel, yeah, he gets. I think he got 3 goals last season, so he definitely gets on the end of things, and he's good for a clean sheet. But he's not massively inspiring. I'm a little bit nervous about this new rule where they're going to play on until they've really played 90 minutes, because matches could go on for I don't know, to 120 minutes, and I don't think that really helps the defenses at all. So I'm starting to look at it and think, well, if you're going to have any defenders at all, if you're going to do anything rather than just have the cheapest possible defenders, then maybe you should be focused on ones that can get attacking returns. And so I'm not sure if that's Gabriel, and maybe I'll be tempted to look at a Stupinan or somebody with a bit more attacking threat. But yeah, I mean, he's a reliable enough option for now. Stones, I'm really questioning, not because I don't think he's a good player, but just I had him for about the last 10 game weeks of last season, and it was an absolute nightmare. And, I just don't know if I could do that to myself again. But the one time that he returned anything, because he didn't play most games for one thing, and the fact that they know that they can, Pep knows that he can use him sparingly if he needs to, and that's not even considering the fact that Cancelo is still there as well. So he's in the conversation. The one time that I didn't start him last season, the one time he returned for me, was he scored a goal when he was on my bench.
Oh no.
I don't know. I honestly, I look at City now and I really do wonder whether, aside from Haaland, it's actually worth backing any of their players, because there are so many alternatives, and there are so many question marks when it comes to City. The fact that they're going to play in the Super Cup as well. That's going to raise question marks over starters. Pep will want to win that. They'll all want to win it, obviously. I guess they've got the Club World Cup at some point. They've got the Champions League. They've got all the other trophies, and they've got a fight on their hands to retain the Premier League. So rotation is, if it's ever been a problem in the past, it's going to be an even bigger one this season. So yeah, I don't know if I really even want to bother with City outside of Haaland. So yeah, Stones could get moved on to somebody else.
It's so interesting how the psychology of what we experienced last season can just make you look at a guy on your team sheet and go, because I used to get that with Reece James, because we talked about him earlier as well. I had a similar situation where I didn't necessarily hold him through the injuries. It was more just the fact that I seemed to only ever actually own him when he got the 1-pointers, and I'd sell him when he got the 18-pointers. And so that already puts me in a predisposed position to go chill all over James if I wanted to go for a Chelsea fullback. And so if Stones has burnt you in the past, it probably helps you look at that on the team sheet and make you just feel like it's the fly in the ointment, or maybe just sort of like an itch on the back of your head, like, oh, need to rub that
Yeah,
out.
definitely, but it's the way with all City players from an FPL perspective. Is that you get them in, and maybe you had Foden when he was returning last season, or you had Mahrez when he was returning, and for they're almost like a drug. For a brief period, they make you feel really good, but you don't realize that in the background they're just subtly ruining your life, and that seems to be how I feel it is with City. Is that they kind of drag you in, and you feel committed to keeping them because you can see what they're capable of doing. But then out of the blue, they don't play for 2 games, or they come on in the 89th minute. I think looking at it this season, I think in the past with players like Gundogan who have been priced at maybe 6 million or something, and really overperformed that. That's a different matter, but now with City players being sensibly priced, Foden maybe looks, they're definitely trying to tempt us with Foden at 7.5. I can see that, but again, there are a lot of other options around that price at Liverpool, at Chelsea, at Arsenal. I don't know. Do we need the headache? Do we need the headache of Man City, especially when you've already got Haaland? That's 14 million of your budget in City already. 28 if you think you're going to captain him every week, which you probably are.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. Man City FPL assets are like drugs. So don't do those, kids. Stay in school. That's that's what we've learned from a man who's won FPL, so he does know what he's talking about. It makes I totally agree with that, because it is very adrenaline focused. It's sort of like, oh, it feels really really good when you've got on them and you've got them at the right time, but it's those emotional swings to just the complete opposite when they don't start, or they come on for 1 point, when someone else has got that steady, consistent starter like a Saka or a Rashford and Fernandes. There's no chance those guys are getting rotated. So very much, I suppose, in keeping with your theme that we talked about at the beginning, that consistency is that differential. There are lots of people going for these Man City assets at the start of the season. I've got Foden in my draft, so there's obviously entirely possible that the more steady Eddie thinking actually produces more points over, say, a 6 to 10 game week period.
Yeah. Couldn't have said it better.
Well, I've done your talking for you. There we are.
I mean, see, you've got me thinking now, because now I'm thinking about Foden. I'm thinking about City's fixtures early on, and they do look really, really good. And I know that they're going to blow some teams away, and it's the people that have the right player at the right time are going to do brilliantly. But just based on past experience, that it just evens out. I mean, look at how good Foden was at points last season. Just how completely essential he seemed at certain points early on last season. And then look at his actual points score, his points tally. By the end of it, these things do even out. The only really reliable City players are Haaland and De Bruyne, and outside of those, I just can't bring myself to commit to another one.
Yeah, well, Foden was 142 points last season, which of course about 40 below De Bruyne, and 130 behind Haaland. So yeah, it's a great point. And I got a little bit nervous there when you said you started to think about Foden, because stay in school, Simon. Don't do drugs. That's the message. That's the message. Stay true to that, and you'll do just fine. But yeah, well, thank you very much for joining us today, Simon. It's been great to pick your brains and talk about what it's like to be an FPL winner, what it means to bring that forward into the modern game as well, and of course go through your team as well. I'm anticipating, as you've sort of already alluded to, potential lots of changes between now and game week 1, just like the rest of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can already there are already changes to the team that you read out. So that's saying something. And yeah, it will definitely change, within the next week or so. I'm certain of it. But I can't wait for it to get started.
Yeah, it's going to be very, just exciting, lots of fun, lots of chaos, all the things that we've come to love about FPL we will experience very, very soon. So, yeah, just one last final reminder for people to, of course, sign up for Fantasy Football Scout membership before the season begins, because you can save up to 30% on those pre-season prices. And don't forget to like and subscribe as well. Hit that bell notification, all helps support the channel, but also give us a good indicator of what content you'd like to see so we can make more of it. But with that, I will leave you fine, folks, to enjoy the rest of your tinkering, and I shall see you next time.